January 14, 2011, in this apparently soulless warehouse outside the city of Bologna, the premiere of a historical event is taking place. For the first time, an audience of journalists and scientists can watch a test of the energy catalyzer, a small device that defies the laws of physics and produces energy, a lot of energy. One man only knows the secrets of this mysterious device. His name is Andrea Rossi. Everything starts with cold fusion, Rossi told us, when in March 1989 Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons announced that they were able to create the sun in a glass. I was very excited. I tried to repeat the experiment, but without success. In the end, Rossi gives up on Fleischmann and Pons' palladium and deuterium, and he decided to try with nickel and hydrogen. Two Italian physicists, Francesco Piantelli and Sergio Focardi, had the same idea.
Ma è stato
Well, it was a very interesting meeting, because it came at a time in which I had given up any research activity. It was an accidental meeting in the street. Focardi was holding a newspaper in his hands and said, "Have just met a crazy man. He wants to produce energy." Then we found out that he wasn't crazy at all. In fact, energy was produced. I approached him to ask him to refute my hypothesis, telling him I'll pay the counseling in order for him to explain to me why this cannot work, so that I can set my mind at rest and stop it. It seemed that Rossi at the time had lost the hope to make it work. But after a conversation and an analysis of the documents, he urged me to go on, and that's what we did. For 2 years, Sergio Focardi and Andrea Rossi met regularly in a makeshift laboratory in Bondeno, close to Ferrara. Their joint effort seems to bear fruits. Focardi kept on giving us results which were more and more thrilling, with energy multiplier factors which were increasingly higher. We were all rather curious. He brought new ideas, those that allowed to get energy in a very concrete way. How did you figure out the idea of these secret additives? Well, it was 10% of intuition and 90% of perspiration. I mean, I tried thousands of reactors and thousands of different combinations until I found the one that worked. The energy catalyzer is ready for its first public appearance. The experimental device is loaded with 1 gram of nickel powder and with a small quantity of high-pressure hydrogen. Andrea Rossi starts the machine. Electric power runs through a coil that heats the reactor. In a few minutes, temperature rises at 100 degrees, turning the water that surrounds the system into steam. Giuseppe Levi, physicist from the University of Bologna, certifies that within 1 hour, the energy catalyzer produced 10 kilowatts of power, a 30-fold increase compared to the energy used. Laws of physics and chemistry cannot explain how the production of such a big amount of energy is possible. We conducted our measurements, we repeated them, we checked that there were no hidden wires and batteries. Now, all the experimental evidence points out that the device is working. The fuel that the device is using is made of nickel and hydrogen. In 24 hours, the device uses 1 gram of hydrogen, and in 180 days uses about 50 grams of nickel. From an economical point of view, how much does it cost? Well, I don't know how much 1 gram of hydrogen costs, maybe 1 cent of euro, and 50 grams of nickel cost 50 cents. I saw it working in December and January. Then we did a technical test at the beginning of February and another one in March. I know that there will be other tests too. So I would say that if these are the premises, it will work. Bologna University will study the phenomenon to find a viable scientific explanation. Andrea Rossi himself will finance the research with 500,000 euros per year. Sergio Focardi, on his hand, has a theory already. Most physicists do not believe in our results. Maybe they think that we're not able to make experiments, but we are sure we can do it. Did you understand what type of process is behind the phenomenon? Yes, I did. The first thing I realized, given the energy that was developed, was that the process had to be nuclear and not chemical. What does it happen? Do nickel and hydrogen fuse together? That's right. The hydrogen nucleus, that is the proton, penetrates nickel nucleus, and when the proton enters the nickel nucleus, it becomes copper and releases energy. But we still do not know how that happens. What kind of innovation did Andrea Rossi introduce to obtain these results? We added a secret additive, whose formula is confidential, to the system formed by hydrogen and nickel. I do not know this additive. I have never asked anything about it, and I do not want to know anything about it, but I know that it facilitates the process. Without the additive, the process will be less. What happens exactly inside the reactor of the energy catalyzer is not clear yet, but Mr. Rossi does not intend to waste any time. He wants to market his invention, a low-cost energy source ready to be used. It is a unit that can be connected with other units, with 300 units connected to each other. We obtain a super unit of about 1 megawatt. We are starting a mass production, and from November the product will be on the market. How much will it cost? The devices cost about $2,000, which is 1,200, 1,300 euros for each kilowatt installed, whereas energy costs less than 1 cent per kilowatt hour. Andrea Rossi's patent application reads 2008. However, in 1995, Professor Piantelli from the Siena University had patented something very similar. His device was the result of years spent in research carried out together with Sergio Focardi. Previous patents take into consideration the possibility of rejection. Rossi's idea is clearly described in the Focardi-Piantelli patent that dates back to 1998. The point is that since something similar already exists, then the patent will not be granted. This is what I think and what European examiners will think. The patent would allow us to publish those documents that are now classified because of the industrial secret. We would be protected. If the patent is not granted, we keep the industrial secret, but our research will not stop for sure. If the patent is granted, Mr. Rossi can claim his intellectual and industrial property rights and might also ask for royalties. He would also be allowed to bestow exploitation contracts. If, on the contrary, the patent is not granted, the subject will be public and people can make whatever they want with it. How much money have you invested in the project? I cannot answer the question, unfortunately. All I can say is that we have invested all our money on this project. So far, I have been involved personally, that's for sure. But who's this man that promises to change the world? Andrea Rossi, 60, from Milan, has a degree in philosophy. He inherited his passion for engineering from his father, who has a machine shop. Still very young, he makes headlines with an intuition that makes Italy dream. We are in the 70s and austerity and the oil crisis underway.
Rossi all'epoca.
Back then, Rossi was in close contact with Politecnico, especially the department that was studying this process and already had the patent. They also founded a magazine called Ambiente, Environment. Many people used to write for the magazine. Rossi set up this plant in Caponago where liquid waste had to be turned into oil. Andrea Rossi promises to turn waste into oil, and this earns him the title of Brianza Chic. In Caponago, north of Milan, rises the plant that within a few years collects tons of industrial waste. The most important companies from northern Italy are in business with Petrodragon, but something goes wrong. Actually, the plant was never operational because it was too small for the amount of waste that Rossi was able to gather. So even if they had been granted the patent, the plant would have not been large enough.
Ci sono state complicazioni di tipo legale.
There have been some legal complications. The materials we were processing have been classified as waste. But this defense line has been questioned in many judicial venues and was considered clearly groundless. Because after many chemical tests, after different seizures of materials, it was demonstrated that it was spent fuel oil with percentages of water which were unacceptable for a product considered as hydrocarbon. And then some customers had huge problems when the products were classified as waste. In that case, the customers would have needed authorizations. But these are things which belong to my past and which have nothing to do with what we are talking about at the moment. And so I kindly ask you not to go on, considering that that was an experience in which I clearly made some mistakes, which cost me a lot, but now please, that's enough.
Rossi cosa ha fatto? Ha preso.
Rossi basically took a series of old and misused refineries where there are big containers, huge storage containers, and stocked the waste collected in all these old refineries scattered all around Italy. The largest one was the one of La Chiarella, and he left the waste there without treating it. This is the former Omer refinery within the La Chiarella municipality. When Petrodragon closed up shop, it left behind 57,000 tons of toxic waste.